Okay. All right, so welcome to the channel. I've got a special guest today. His name is Gabor Guzik, and he is a user interface and user designer, also product designer for several major companies. Vodafone most currently, and he's also worked with Microsoft and then one of the world's largest gaming platforms or gaming streaming platforms.
Game streaming platforms, yeah.
Great, yeah. So we're going to be diving into some of your experiences as both how you got into the industry, and then also from a hiring manager. Now you're a hiring manager. From a hiring manager's perspective, what we look for, or what he looks for when he is interviewing somebody. So he's got a ton of knowledge in this field. So I'm really excited about this conversation. And from getting into the industry you kind of fell into it. So we're gonna go through and walk through your career, how you can get started, and if you're interested in a similar type of career, this is going to be a really great conversation. So pay close attention. So first of all, Gabor, thank you for joining us. You are actually in Hungary, correct?
Hello. Yes, yeah. I'm in Hungary right now and working remote for multiple companies.
Yeah. So we are a global audience here, and so I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's just jump right into it. If you want to just give yourself a quick introduction as well, and maybe we can start from where you got started.
Alrighty. So currently I am a senior user experience designer at Vodafone. Attached to that is a senior UI designer position. Basically, with my role comes the ability, not the ability, but basically with my role comes the requirement that I look at a ton of resumes, portfolios, and hire people across the board for both our teams and the external offshore teams. It depends on who's hiring and the basic role requirements.
So let's talk about for people who aren't aware that in the IT space, there's a lot of different verticals, and one of them that you specialized in is this user interface and user design. What exactly is that for somebody who is thinking about getting into the industry and isn't sure where to specialize?
The best way I can describe my job is I create a visual representation of functions and features of certain products. And the idea here is that whatever you see in terms of web page, an application, or a digital product, for example, Spotify, is consisting of two major aspects: user interface and user experience. User interface is basically the visual elements and visual representations. And user experience is the workings of the laws and mechanics of the said user interface. So whenever you feel like something isn't right or it's not in the right place, that's usually my fault.
So if somebody were to get into this, I think your story is pretty interesting because you didn't necessarily make a concerted effort. You kind of and essentially fell into it. So do you want to maybe let's walk through a little bit about your history with how did you get into this field, and as far as the first steps that somebody would need to take. Let's just walk through your story.
All right, so basically I didn't set out as a user interface or user experience designer, or we nowadays call ourselves digital product designers. That wasn't my goal. I didn't really do that. When I started out, it was just a small little side passion for a friend. I started in a local print company where I worked as a letter picker. Basically, they cut out the letters and my job was to use a small little needle and just poke out the letters and put them in the right place, which paid well for a summer job, but it wasn't really what you would call a creative job. Later down the line, I kind of went away from that. So I went to university and started learning how to become an English teacher, which is oddly weird comparing how I don't speak English nowadays that well.
English is pretty good to me.
Oh, thank you. But that was the plan originally, to become an English and IT informatics teacher. So it's computer science. It's a CS teacher. That was the original goal. But I kind of failed out of university, as per many people. And then I kind of realized that I have a certain knack for basic visual design. It wasn't anything superb. I started out with basic web pages and a few flyers for friends or other businesses locally. So it wasn't even superbly professional or even done well. It's just something to pass the time and come up with a few things. And in the meantime, though, I realized that, yeah, this is actually something that I might be good at that. So I went to a local school to learn the basics of the trade. And there I realized that those tools that they were using, those techniques, I already knew a lot about because I was freelancing for in this career. However, they gave me the paper. So in 2 years, I got a sort of bachelor's equal level training, but it wasn't, let's just say it. But it wasn't really important. What's important in that school is that there was a door next door. Not a door, there was a sign next door that had, if you are interested in web design, knock on the door. So I did. And the company that were looking for entry-level positions, quite literally the lowest level, just go in, make a website, go, get out. And it was WordPress based. But I learned a lot there. I learned how to design quick logos fast, how to develop themes, how to implement those themes on 100+ websites. So at that point, I started off my career. However, the company folded on basics. Just, things happen. So at the time, I was really, really down on myself and thought, okay, what am I going to do now? Because I don't really have anything else to do. I decided to start up my own business and became a sort of freelancer, as you would call it. In Hungary, it's called different things. It's self-employed, but freelancer, self-employed has different connotations. Basically, I pay my own bills. That's what it meant. I pay my own taxes. I pay my own bills. And that is the point where the whole career path actually started for me, as I was freelancing a lot. I made a career out of picking up the scraps from others. So there's a really bad saying that goes around designers, is that sometimes you just disappear. Designers just don't deliver. They don't care, whatever. And I made a living off of doing clients that exact thing. It's just like when they had this problem, I was the one who they called, and I was the one who finished the job and get things done the right way and the fast way. And it is a bit of a frustrating start for both sides because they come in with the negative notion that you're going to get away from the project. But then again, once you deliver, they will be forever in your debt. And as soon as you start delivering like that and you become punctual and they rely on you, they start to give you more and more responsibility, more and more jobs. So much so that by the end of year one, I had a pretty decent company under myself. It was still just me and myself, but it was good enough to use it as a resume item and start looking for occasional side gigs. And
So
getting
it's
one of these.
just curious, how did you get from being somebody that just came right out of school and just getting your start on this freelance by getting these scraps, but how did you start getting those first jobs for somebody that's looking to do something similar?
Yeah. So the very first thing you need to do is contact friends and family. They make the worst possible clients ever, and I'm going to tell you that from experience. Friends and family are terrible clients, but they will teach you a lot of good things as to how to manage terrible clients and how to survive in this area. Plus, they will give you a basic resume item and a portfolio item, because that's one of the key aspects that most people lack when they start out, is that they don't have any references to show other people.
Mm-hmm.
And friends and family will give you one side. Now, if you don't have friends and family because you're an introvert like myself, there are options to do. There are a lot of forums out there who are looking for partners on certain projects, even just small help here and there. And you can start off with that. Once people start to notify you, take notice of you, that is the point when they will start getting you better and better jobs, to the point where it's quite feasible that you will land a really big gig on yourself, and you're just going to have to do it for yourself.
So you just kind of build up slowly through kind of back channels until you get a little traction underneath you.
Yeah, I wouldn't spend a lot of advertising money. Some people recommend that you go in and start advertising on Facebook, Google. The reality is that doing these advertising campaigns, you will realize that you can spend tens of thousands of dollars and get absolutely nothing back, because of the whole advertising space is that much more oversaturated compared to what it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if I spent $1,000 on advertising, I would have landed most major companies, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. But nowadays, it just way too many advertisers, and the ads themselves aren't as efficient as they were back in the day. So I would say the best way to do is organic growth. So potentially friends, family, and pick up other jobs. And additionally, you can look for specific forums, such as Reddit threads have a few of these job advertisements where they're just looking for somebody to get things in order and shape and just move on. And I think that's the best way I would recommend people to do this, because one, they get a client out of it. Two, they get experience with real clients, and that's going to trump any other method.
And then they're going to get that portfolio started as well, which is critical. Yeah. Okay. So then after you did that you had your first year, actually, you ended up with a fairly successful, or at least heading in a successful direction. So yeah, take us through that.
Yeah, so basically after my first year in freelancing, I was looking to branch out because I thought that design wasn't going to be profitable enough for me to sustain myself or to sustain a little bit of growth in the future. So what I did was a friend of mine contacted me and said, hey, there's a small company here. They're looking for customer service representatives. At the time, I was doing that on the side for a major German gaming company, but I didn't really think that it's going to be that much profitable. However, I still contacted them, sent out my basic application, and I attached my little resume to that letter as well, thinking that at the worst case scenario, nobody will look at it. However, they looked at it immediately, and I would say I was at the right place at the right time with the right tool sets, because as soon as I sent out the resume, 2 days later, the head of the company contacted me that, hey, we are doing a site redesign project. Let's talk about your basic web design skills. And we had a quick chat, and that is how I got hired to MC Pro Hosting. So at that point, we were doing one of the biggest rebrands of that company, where we went from a simple website to completely redesigned flow of users, how to purchase servers, and how to make the purchasing experience that much better. And I was brought on board as a simple web designer to get things moving in the right direction. But during that time, I realized that I kind of like doing I kind of like figuring out how to interact with users a little bit better, how to make their lives a touch better if possible. And that little spark turned into my yearning to become a user experience designer, to actually learn about this trade far more effectively. And a few years later, just I think about 2 years down the line, we had a lot of projects in the meantime, macro sites, marketing campaigns, you name it, we probably had it. And my boss came in and said, hey, we're going to do a live streaming platform. I was like, what? How did this happen? So there's a whole story behind that part, and it's convoluted and quite hectic in its own right. It's not my story to tell, but generally what happened was we formed a small live streaming platform called Beam that grew into later down the line to Mixer, the Microsoft-owned streaming platform. Now,
so this was so this was a startup, a brand new company, a spinoff of your current company that eventually evolved into Mixer, which Microsoft then later acquired.
Yes. Well, okay. Technically, it was rebranded after Microsoft acquired it. So there's a little bit of an overlap there, but the idea is that Beam started and grew into a large streaming platform and then rebranded itself into Mixer after the acquisition went through.
Gotcha. Okay. Microsoft ended up acquiring the company that you helped kind of start. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And basically at the time, I wasn't sure that what's going to be happening to me, because like I'm a nobody. I didn't have a degree in any sort of science. I was self-taught, and I was looking at what's going to happen to me. But they were quite happy to take me on, as with most of these cases, probably contractual obligations partially, and the fact that I helped build it by default, that meant I was on board for at least a few weeks. But it turns out that they didn't want me just for a few weeks, but they actually wanted me for quite a few years, free, in fact. That's how long we managed to do things. But my contract was a simple freelance type contract, which meant that I was exclusive to Microsoft. I was working for them all time, fully added at all hours compensated, but I wasn't a full-time employee. And with full-time employment comes a few benefits and rules and regulations. So they could have let go of me anytime as they felt it. Yet they kept me on for 3 years, so I was happy. But that's one of the biggest things I had to deal with, is the continuous imposter syndrome that I had even back then, and even today, kind of suffer from that a little bit. But after the
yeah, and I'm just looking at, yes, if you want to walk through after the acquisition, some of the interesting projects, because you've worked on some really interesting projects with them.
Yeah, so even before the acquisition, we won Techstars events. So it was 2015, I think, or 16, somewhere around there. We had won a lot of tech events, and after the acquisition, basically, we went off to build Mixer in itself. However, during that time, we joined Microsoft in the best possible time for design, because at the time, Project Neon, which is nowadays called, I think, Microsoft Motion, the visual language of Microsoft was just getting its own spin-off. The dashboard of the Xbox was getting a major overhaul, and it was partially my work as well, because a certain section of that dashboard, the Mixer Twist, was my responsibility. I wouldn't say solely my responsibility. It was working in a team, but I was involved in it quite heavily, and I kind of liked the end of it.
So that was the home page for Xbox when you would log into your Xbox.
Yes, the home page and the second tab, actually, if I recall correctly, or the third. Oh, it is so long ago. But it was one of the major contact points. So it was one of the funnels that we used to drag users into our platform, because one of the goals for Microsoft was to integrate Mixer or Beam more heavily into Microsoft services. So I redesigned the login system as much as possible. Microsoft sign-up is a bit limited in itself, but generally, we did everything we could to funnel users into Mixer and consequently the Microsoft ecosystem.
Interesting. Okay. So, yeah. So as you worked through on a variety of different projects, Mixer, the homepage Mixer Twist was kind of that seems to me like to be a pretty alpha. I mean, that's a nice thing to put on a resume or in a portfolio for sure. What happened? So you were working on a contract basis, but they kept on renewing your kind of an open-ended contract to help with some of the intellectual design, bringing that from the Beam platform into Microsoft. And you were there for a few years. So what happened with Microsoft?
So after 3 years, as usually with every acquisition, there's a honeymoon period where everybody is happy, everybody is joyful. And then after the acquisition, basically the KPI started to come in more heavily into realization. So, more and more demand rise. And the reality was that eventually, sadly, the higher-ups decided that Mixer is not the right platform to invest so much money and so much time in. But that didn't come out until, I think, late 2020-ish. So for me, it was the beginning of fiscal year 20 when they decided to downsize the team a little bit. And the easiest people to let go are the contractors, of course. So my contract wasn't renewed. It was a little bit of a major hit to me, because I didn't really think I would stand up for it. It's like, once you work at a company like Microsoft, where do you go? How do you stand up? Or even worst case scenario, how do you consider yourself to be worthy? Because the reality is still have this imposter syndrome that I'm dealing with, that I'm just not good enough. And it turns out I might be good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of talking about this imposter syndrome, I mean, here is somebody who went through and essentially through merit and just get there's a degree of luck. I think when you talked about in the beginning of your career, you kind of get a little lucky in being in the right place at the right time. But because your portfolio was so strong through the freelance work that you ended up getting opportunities to prove yourself and get into this visual, the user design, the user experience kind of career vertical, and then getting a tap on the shoulder essentially to go and start a new exciting kind of tech spinoff that kind of every tech spinoff's dream is to get picked up by or bought out by a major corporation, right? So that happens. And then now you get to work for several years, over 3 years at Microsoft, where you are working for one of the world's largest and most well-known tech companies, and really adding value and working on the main page of the if you've ever used an Xbox in the last 3 to 4 years, you've essentially used your design, you've used your work, which, coming full circle, saying then once Microsoft decides to downsize the team, then you are now feeling this imposter syndrome, which is, to me, is I would think of it as, it's a once you get Microsoft on your resume, now you've got real meat on the bone there to really work with. And so it is interesting to see, this concept of imposter syndrome, because even when you do work at such a high level and work for such a well-known and very visual, and no pun intended there, it's very highly visual because lots of people are seeing your work. Lots of people are seeing your visual work. That having this imposter syndrome, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, because it's like, at what point do you feel like you've arrived? Because, I mean, clearly you have the skill set and the work portfolio to back up your experience.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I will ever get rid of this imposter syndrome. It's not because of my choices of not having a degree in the science or anything else. It's basically who I am. However, I do have tenacity when it comes to my jobs and the skills I do. I always continue to learn, and this is partially why I consider myself a decent designer. Is the continuous drive to learn isn't just fueled by my own passion, but rather the fear of slowing down and skipping the whole thing and becoming complacent, so to speak. Where if I didn't have this imposter syndrome, I would say I wouldn't be doing as good, because I wouldn't be learning over and over again. I pick up continuous classes on basics. Even nowadays, I subscribe to starter classes on UI and UX and learn from them and redo the basics over and over again. I revisit how to do Kanban, Scrum, other methodologies, so design sprints 2.0. All the tool sets are completely always refreshed. And I think it might be one of the best suits to have is, if you're struggling with this imposter syndrome, that you're feeling that you're not good enough, then use it as use it as a strengthening point for yourself. If you feel that you're weak, then just work on that weakness, because it will drive you further. Nobody can tell you how weak you are. You yourself are the one who determines that.
Yeah, and I think that's also another really good call out, and something that I've advocated quite a bit on my channel, is just the idea of continuous improvement in your own career. I mean, we work on it in our jobs, but looking back at your own career and having this imposter syndrome kind of fuel that it's a great way of turning this syndrome that could really hold you back, and you've been able to kind of flip it around and use it to propel yourself. And it's important to point out that if you are in your career and you become complacent, you start working at a place for multiple years and you just let the tech, especially in tech, because the technology moves so quickly and so rapidly that what you were working on one day, the type of technology, by the time 2 or 3 years in, if you haven't kept up with where the industry is going, you will be considered kind of a dinosaur even in 3 years. And if you are not staying up on the latest in technology, then the other people that you're going to be competing against will be. And so it's really important to keep your skill set very sharpened and kind of current. So that's a really great call out. And I think that from a there's not somebody in your career that's in most cases that is tapping you on the shoulder at your work and saying, hey, it's time to go get your training, hey, it's time to go learn the new skill. You have to be self-directed in that, and in your career, and in particular in technology, but this is applicable to really any career path. you have to be you have to be continuously improving and looking for those opportunities, because when you come out of the market, I mean, you weren't necessarily anticipating Microsoft shutting down this focus, but because you kept your skills so sharpened, you had a pretty soft landing. You only had a month or two before you got picked up by another major company. So this again, this idea of the imposter syndrome fueling you to a very strong career path, is a very real thing.
Yeah, so basically after Microsoft finished up, for me, I thought to myself, hey, I'm going to take a few months just for myself, play games, enjoy a little bit, try to relax, because I was working continuously and furiously on the project for so long that I said, okay, let's take a step back. Well, that didn't pan out whatsoever. After 3 months or so, I started applying to jobs because I was like, if I don't get a job, what's going to happen to me? It's like, it's an anxiety. Even if you know that you have a runway long enough that you could sustain yourself for a long time, even then, it's just every single bank account charge is just like blinks red. It's like, no, I don't like that.
Yeah.
So basically after 3 months of sort of time to take for myself, I started applying to jobs. I applied for 3 jobs, got 2 offers from it, and decided from one of them is Vodafone, currently, if I would say, even if not Europe's, but definitely in the top telecom companies of the world, and kind of became one of the senior designers there, which is fun in itself. I get to do a lot of fun things, plus I am on the flagship product, user-facing product, to be honest, which is the My Vodafone application, part of the team, and I am kind of happy with that. It's surprisingly a weird landing, so to speak, because I wasn't expecting it like that. I applied for an IoT position, which was Internet of Things, and I expected to design smartwatches and fridges, how to integrate those two together and create meaningful interfaces. But life had a different path for me, it seems. So I'm currently in a really good position, and I'm enjoying myself in multiple ways. Plus, I got to learn a lot, and interviewing people, learning how to interview and be on the other side of said interviews is a definite skill on itself, and quite scary in itself. Like when you're sweating more than your candidate, then it's, oh God, what am I doing wrong?
So you landed at Vodafone. Again, it's one of the world's largest telecoms. I mean, it's probably equivalent to Verizon here in the United States. It's a major alpha company, and because you had built up such strong equity in a resume and on your portfolio. I mean, if you can come in there showing that you've done something, like working on the homepage for the Xbox, I mean, it's not surprising to me that you would have the resume for it, and then B, you'd also have that's something that you can very intimately discuss your thought processes, how you work, your roles in those teams, to a company like Vodafone, and applying to 3 jobs and getting 2 offers. That's where most people want to be. So, it just shows you the power of really developing yourself, and and really sticking to your guns. And if you can get those alpha companies, I mean, they really open up a lot of doors.
Even if you don't, one of the key aspects in my job is the forever need to learn and to study. And because our job is fast moving, every day, every week, there's a new technique or a new solution to a problem that already existed previously. Just some materialize itself out of nothing. I call it the ether effect. So it just comes out of nothing. So it probably is from the ether. That's the basic definition. And to be honest, if you don't keep up, yes, you're going to fall behind a lot. And if you fall behind a lot, you don't necessarily need an alpha company. You don't need big tech or other major companies to get to, because they have their own problems and limitations that you have to deal with. I would say try to find a company that you kind of like working for. That's a huge thing, because otherwise you're going to hate your job and it's going to chew at you continuously. So even if I know people who worked at Facebook for multiple years and they hate their job to the bone, like as soon as Facebook said, we might let go of you, they were like super happy and yay, finally I'm out of here. It's not technically Facebook's fault. It was just wasn't the greatest fit for the person. And they realized it a little bit too late, a few years down the line. It happens. So even if you don't aim for a big tech job, aim for something that you are enjoying yourself in and does pay the bills. That's kind of a big thing with jobs.
Yeah, so you had a chance now in your current role. You are doing interviewing and helping make hire decisions. So can you walk through what you look for in a candidate who is applying to one of the roles that you're interviewing for? So what are some of the things that you look for?
In our fields, one of the core features and functions we are looking for in a person is problem solving. You have to have the ability to solve problems despite not having all the information to solve that problem. So you have to have the drive to go out and seek information, to find the problem, define the problem occasionally, and then solve that with your creative thinking. So I would say our field is heavily dependent on problem-solving skills and applied problem-solving skills, of course. So once you have defined a problem and created a solution, you have to have the ability to materialize the solution in proper designs, explain your solution. Definitely a huge step in our process is explaining your position and solution to people who are not well versed in your job, who don't even know what your job is. They only know that they want to see something that they can understand, approve, and then get out the window. So my key aspects is, of course, problem solving, then your ability to communicate said problem solving skills, and how you communicate through your designs in visual terms. So a good resume is a must. A good portfolio is highly recommended. Don't be like me. And generally move forward with that, hopefully with good reviews on your resumes eventually.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit more about the portfolio and then the importance of the portfolio. If you were to recommend somebody that's just getting into this industry, how to build up a portfolio that gets noticed by Vodafone and gets noticed by hiring managers at Microsoft, what kinds of things would you recommend they focus on?
Sure. First of all, the very first thing, design muscle flexing is a good thing. You should definitely flex your muscles, but be aware, designing the 450th weather app and the 10,000 music application is not going to get you noticed. It's not going to get you through the door in most places, because it is what it is. It's just designing your basically you're flexing your design muscles. So you're doing what you have known for the longest time, and it's going to be a routine exercise for you. That isn't telling me anything in your portfolio. So what I want to see in your portfolio is impact, preferably. Impact you had on projects, impact you had on the results, of course. And in most cases, yeah, if you're starting out, you're not going to have that. You're not going to have impact with your uncle's website, etc. It's going to be highly limited. So another good option is to take a mock project. Take a real world example, take a real world problem that you're facing or you have known to face, and try to solve it, apply your skills to it and solve that problem. You won't be burdened with technological and other limitations, of course, and you can set out in that mind phase that there are certain limitations you will not cross. But if you don't have real life projects you can show off, then at the very least take time and create projects that are impactful around you. For example, just recently I did a cool little exercise for myself, which was taking Hungarian railway companies' terrible, horrendous application and applied it. So basically, I analyzed the UX of it. I broke down every single screen, what the decision making was behind those screens, And then I applied a little bit of common sense and tried to improve it. And eventually it might land up on my portfolio as a case study, because it isn't my project. It wasn't a real project. However, it does have real world implications to me. And whenever an employer looks at my portfolio down the line, they will see that, hey, while that wasn't a real project, it showed that this guy does this type of thing. This is his thinking method. This is his solving method, and these things build up. And this is going to paint a real picture of my skills and applications. And that's what's really important in a portfolio.
Yeah, and it's a lot deeper than just the 100th weather app or the 100th doodling coloring app or something like that, where it's just real simple. If you can take real life examples and turn them into portfolio pieces, and you could, if you had a really good mock-up of this Hungarian railway systems application, hey, you could always shoot it over to the hiring manager there and just say, hey, just want to let you know this is just a mock-up that I did, and man, they might end up with either a freelance gig or a job interview out of it. But creating really solid, especially in technical and creative fields, creating those really solid functional problem solving portfolio is going to be something that, especially somebody coming in from, if they just maybe got out of university and are really starting to try to build their career, I think it's a great recommendation to look at real life examples of bad or less than good user interface in existing products that they may be using, or existing companies, and then try to apply that. So you don't have to have, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. There's a lot of conversation about like, well, I'm a new into the workforce. How do I get my foot in the door when they're asking for all this experience and I don't have experience because I can't get my foot in the door somewhere? And so that's a really great way for visual people, for creatives, for tech folks who can demonstrate their knowledge. Even from a computer program, if you're doing code, you can write code that solves real life problems as part of your portfolio. And essentially you have an advantage there over the person who, an HR person. I can't really demonstrate my ability to hire people when I haven't hired people before, or working as an engineer on a plant floor somewhere. It's hard to do that as a portfolio. But so you do have an advantage as a designer slash user interface slash coder slash graphic designer, any of that kind of stuff, where you can really get really good examples of real life problem solving. And then it gives you also not only does it give you the portfolio piece to get noticed, but it also gives you something to discuss in an interview. Because as a hiring manager, you're going to want to know, okay, yeah, you did this. You did this project, but I want to know, like, why did you make this decision? And tell me about your thought process about that. What was the strategy and how did you develop it? And if you're able to do that through some fake real problems, then I think it's going to give you a lot more ammunition to go in and sit down confidently without this imposter syndrome in an interview. And I mean, and really give yourself a leg up versus the people who didn't do that.
Yeah, that was a funny thing that you mentioned, is like, why did you make this decision? One of the key factors in a hiring manager's sort of position, I'm not a hiring manager, I'm a senior designer who looks over the hiring process.
But you're involved but you're involved in the decision-making process. So if we were recruiting a new user designer because you're a senior user experience and user interface designer, if we were hiring somebody and the department manager is bringing in somebody new, they're going to pull you into an interview and you're going to be one of the critical decision makers. In fact, usually your experience in your interview with the candidate holds more weight than just about anybody else, because you're the one that's actually going to be working with them closest. So yeah, so I would say from an interview perspective, I would put you in the same term of hiring manager. Maybe it's not you're not making the exact, you're not creating the actual offer, but your input into that interviewing process is held with very high weight.
Fair enough. In any ways, what I wanted to say is one of the key factors I've noticed from a lot of people who are in my field and position is the fact that they want to get defensive over their decisions. when I ask a problem and I say that, hey, why didn't you make this decision? Why wouldn't you, improve this with that? Or have you ever considered another option? I'm not attacking you. I'm not attacking your position and decision. What I'm trying to figure out is how you handle when somebody does attack you. Because in our field, making mistakes is a common thing. We make it all the time. We make bad icons, bad user interfaces, bad color choices, miss a few opportunities when we could have had, and we get feedback all the time regarding that. And it's probably one of the key aspects that differentiate a person who has worked in a field for quite a few years versus a starter is the fact that somebody who starts out usually feels that this is a personal attack, something that they did a mistake, and they, oh my God, it's the end of the world and everything is going to fall apart, and I made a mistake in the interview and they're not going to hire you. I don't care if you made a mistake in the interview. I don't really even hold you to that. I've probably forgotten by the time I asked the question. It's not about that. It's how you handle your mistake is what's important, because if you go into the sort of self-strengthening positive feedback loop, or in this case, negative feedback loop, oh my God, I made a mistake, I'm not going to make this mistake, but then you just make a much more terrible mistake in the future. It's a problem. It's something that you should definitely work on, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, even during the interview process. Don't be afraid to say, yeah, I didn't think of that when I designed this. That's a good solution. I might look into it, how to improve it. But again, if you're too complacent with these decisions, that means you're not willing to defend your stance. And that's another side of the story that you shouldn't fall into. So try to be assertive in some ways. Try to explain your decisions and explain why you made that decision and how it impacted the product. And be prepared to defend the position, but don't be over defensive or completely complacent, because neither of them is actually good enough.
Yeah. At Amazon, one of the core competencies that you get assessed against is has backbone. So you make a decision and they want to see that you can hold up to criticism and you believe in what you did, to the point where you can take the criticism but still hold firm and say, no, this is why I did this. But then the other one is one of the other competencies is right most of the time. So making decisions that you believe in and really understanding it and being knowledgeable enough that you're right most of the time, even though you're not going to be right 100% of the time. So those are two major competencies. But I think it is important to, as you go in, you're going to, even in interviews, you're going to be challenged on your decision-making processes, because not only are they trying to assess your decision-making process, but they're trying to challenge how would you interact with other people in an organization where your design is, or you work with a difficult customer, or a design is challenged by somebody that you're submitting to, because you are going to get that. And, it is something that you should be expecting in an interview process, and it's in addition to that, in a workplace setting, because you are going to have situations where you're going to be dealing with people that don't like your code, and it's not personal. It's not a personal attack, or they don't like your design, but it's how do you manage that? And if you've done that in throughout your career in your you created really good portfolio pieces, you should feel very confident about the decisions that you've made. And that's why it's so important to have really good portfolio pieces, because now you can talk very, very in depth about why you made the certain decisions that you made, versus if you just had a weather app, there's not a lot of depth there. So it's hard to go in an interview setting. It's going to be a lot harder to go into a deep conversation about why you made the decisions that you did, when it's just like, there's a couple clicks of a button to get to different, maybe a different city you load up or something like that. But back to your original point of creating really solid portfolio pieces that add value.
And that's a good segue into what kind of not to do in a portfolio is don't be as arrogant as I was. When I started out, I probably was arrogant and stupid at the same time, and I didn't even realize neither of them, because I had a zip file with my portfolio with just 25 to 50 images of websites and other stuff I did. And that was my portfolio. That's it. And now, as somebody who has to go through and look at other people's portfolios, I have to realize that that was an incredibly stupid and arrogant thing to do. Somehow I still got the jobs in the past, and it's probably down to luck again and just raw skill, but don't do that. So what I want to see in your portfolio, and what generally most designers want to see in your portfolio, or even, to be honest, in most creative thinking or problem-solving solutions, whether it be engineers or designers, one of the key aspects we want to see is how you came to that conclusion. What were the limitations you worked on, and how you solved the problem, and what kind of decision you made, of course. As you said, people will be challenging your decisions constantly due to engineering limitations or just general money limitations. Time is of the essence, as they say it. We can't spend 500 hours on figuring out if a button is good rounded or squared. It's not going to add value, but like if you make a decision, you have to have the tenacity to back up your decision, even if it means walking through through your portfolio. And this is why a good portfolio is key in our jobs. Nowadays, I wouldn't be caught dead without half decent portfolio. But one of the key aspects I always tell every single one of my mentees and students who learn from me is that, please, your portfolio should have at least a few words under each image why this image is important, what were the decision factors that were made during this creation of this image, and have you had any variations of this image, or even variations on the wireframes and flows? Because occasionally the limitation will come not from you, not from your raw skill or talent, but from external factors such as engineering time or the client's short-sightedness. There's no easy way to put it. It's just that, like, we can create a solution that would accommodate 400 options versus a solution that can accommodate the exact same amount of options we have right now. Clients will choose the one that we have right now. And in some ways, it's good enough that the scope is set for you and you designed according to that scope. But having the option to at least see what you would have done without those limitations is another great addition to your portfolio. So don't be afraid to mistakes. Don't be afraid to have these judged, but at the very least have some few words. I don't want a litany. I don't need 400 pages book and a novel and a serialization option for said novel to be able to read your portfolio. Just a few words is perfectly enough, because images themselves do not convey, the same way as code do not convey the back-end thinking of said thing. You can link me a GitHub project, and I'm happy that you did, but it doesn't tell me what were the limiting factors that you had to consider. Who was the client, for example? Why these limiting factors came to be? I just see a code and I see, you could have improved at least 500 things on this. Why did you choose this? And if you don't have anything to tell me why, it just reflects badly on you, to be honest, at that point. It's not an ending, like you still made the code and your portfolio is still being looked at, but having that one extra step makes a huge difference.
Do you have any recommendations for somebody as far as developing their portfolio? How many like portfolio pieces should they have? Should there be different types of portfolio or different types of content in their portfolio? How would you recommend that mix look like?
Oh, well, this is a harder question. It goes back to a little bit better. So basically, you need a resume for starters. The resume or CV is the one thing that will get you through HR, basically, because HR cannot make
it'll get you through me.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So that's like the point of a resume and a portfolio. Sorry, the point of a resume and a CV is to get you through HR's vigorous basic testing. So if you read that they require a letter of introduction, write that letter of introduction and write it to the specification that they require, because that's HR jobs to filter out the non-reading factors. So basically, if you can't read the specific requirements, then how are you going to read a ticket and go and solve it? If it's just basic stuff. Do as they say. The next thing you need in your portfolio. The next thing you will need is a portfolio, and in that portfolio you will need a certain few things. One, a sort of a rehashed version of who you are in terms of the CV. A good thing to have is download to your CV. That's appreciated because occasionally we might not get one or the other from HR. So if you can interlink them, that's a really good thing.
It's good user interface. It's good
It's
user
just basic
experience.
stuff.
Good user
Having a
experience.
contact,
Yeah.
it's surprisingly a lot of times I think I had to throw out around 50 or so CVs and resumes in the past because they didn't attach any resemblance of a portfolio. And here I am. It's like, how am I going to make a decision about you without seeing your work? Like, should I get you an interview? Should I hire the next person who has their CV and resume filled out to exact specification that we need to look at his work and everything else? Of course, I'm going to call him in because he's not a joker card. He's selling what exactly I'm going to get, and that's awesome. So your portfolio should contain, I would say, around minimum 3 to 5 projects. That would be ideal. But even if it contains one good project, that's perfectly enough. You don't have to go overboard. For engineers, I would say code examples, GitHub examples are a must. However, there are certain limitations in both design and code where I understand that you can't show part of your portfolio. I've had to work with some people who said that I worked for this company for 8 years and I can't show anything of it because even the project names are classified. It happens. In that case, still get some projects, again, the mock projects, etc., to show in your project. And for coders, get GitHub links so I can view your code. For designers, I don't need source files. I just need the final images and explanations of what happened. So a walkthrough. I prefer, that's me probably, but most of the designers I work with prefer case study-like approaches to their portfolios. So it isn't just a few images thrown in together and have at it hidden, but rather a few words about the limitations, the factors, the decisions, and the outcome, and even potentially effect, if you had any, on the project. If it's a real project, you probably have some KPIs to mention. HR loves KPIs, so you might want to indulge a few of them. And after you have a portfolio, the next thing you should have, and this is something that not many people talk about, but during the interview process, you will have a little bit of time to talk about yourself, and not just yourself, but your projects, your history. And what really stands out to me all the time is the people who actually prepare for this time smartly. So I always recommend to my students that, hey, you should have a 15 to 20 slide presentation about your work. It's not mandatory, and most time you will not have a chance to even show it. But when you have, it will give that one extra point, one extra cookie point, basically, where you are presenting a presentation that is meant to showcase your work, your history, and it's organized. It shows a few things to the hiring people there. One, that you are able to present your work, which is a huge plus in our book. And the other one is you prepared for the interview well in advance, that you have a basic presentation ready. Even if it's a cop-out, basic copy-paste presentation that you did for everything, if you have that, that means you take the initiative and drive the interview process when you have the chance to do so. That will tell me that you're not just a simple everyday worker bee, but rather somebody who's going to grow at a company, or even become a leader at another company if it comes to that. But it shows me that you're willing to grow.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, I really like that idea. Yeah, and chances are you may not be. Especially in the earlier stages where the interviews tend to be quicker. But as you get more deep into your interview, or maybe a hiring manager who is really seriously considering you, just anything that you can do that sets you apart from the competition, because you're going to be competing, especially at big companies, you're going to be competing against hundreds of people for a single job, or maybe a single opportunity. So anything that you can do to give yourself a little bit of a leg up, would be helpful. And then I would recommend, from a portfolio perspective, probably don't want to bring in a thumb drive. You probably want to have it be on a website, versus the kind of the older way of doing things. So especially as a user interface, create a nice website that you can show your skill in how you even present yourself from a user design experience.
To that, I have a good way of not doing it. Don't do like this guy does, who actually just did a Squarespace site for himself. I can code my own websites. It's part of the actual portfolio works I do, that I can code proper HTML and CSS to proper engineering standards.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I just can't get myself to not do the easy way out. So if you can code, I would highly recommend that you build your own website. Even if you're not particularly web-focused coder, in that case, just use a core templating system, such as Bootstrap, HTML, CSS type, or use a Docker website hosting solution, anything to not be the next Squarespace site. But if you can't, it's perfectly fine. Use Squarespace, use Wix, use whatever you need to get your portfolio. But as you said it, a good idea to do it is to not do it as a thumb drive. However, prepare for the occasion that you might not have internet access to a local interview. I actually ran into this problem when I was interviewing at Vodafone. Basically, the local intranet was locked out, so there wasn't public accessible Wi-Fi, and my portfolio was on Wi-Fi. So what did I do? I went out of the office, went out of the building, I took my own mobile phone, Control-save the website of every single page, and I just downloaded it via Firefox and then showed it. Because I wasn't expecting the fact that I couldn't present. And the other one is my MacBook, my personal MacBook, wasn't equipped with an HDMI port. And every single presentation tool that they had in-house was HDMI. So if you ever going to go in-house, have the necessary adapters with you. It's not because they don't have, it's the fact that they might not have it at hand either, because they weren't expecting that you do it.
Yes.
But it's a small thing. If you don't, it's fine, nobody cares. But again, I would say have your main website and main portfolio accessible through the web, because occasionally you might have to talk to people who are vast distances away from you, and they should have the ability to look at the website and your portfolio without you interrupting, so they can click through and just be done with it, and have a version prepared for the fact that if there's no internet whatsoever, so have a localized version of it.
Yeah, that's great. So somebody who is just getting started, how do you recommend that they get in? What skills should they be focusing on, or what platform should they be focusing on? I mean, obviously this changes throughout, as time goes on, but what are the industry standards or the core skills that they should be developing, or core software packages, or whatever you would call it?
That's a really good question. Honestly, of course, to every tool out under the sun is a good thing to have. But for this question, I probably need to separate out two major use cases. First use case is when you have unlimited time. By that, I mean you are not limited by your budget. You're not limited to a time limit of 6 months or whatever. So basically, you can sign up and become a design school graduate and go to proper university, etc. At that case, what you should focus on is trying to figure out what you like best. Try a little bit of everything and figure out what works for you, what kind of direction you would like to do. Because some cases, some of my colleagues don't like doing UI whatsoever. They just like user research, and they became user research specialists. So try to figure out what works for you and what you kind of like, and specialize into that. The other use case is when you have a limited time. This means that, for example, you will let go and you have to get a job in 6 months, for example, because that's the runway you have. For 6 months, you're safe, but after that, no. So in that case, I would recommend to just focus one thing. Pick out either of these sort of directions: engineering, design, which part of design, which part of engineering, front end, back end, full stack, whatever, and learn all the skills you can as fast as possible. Because at that time you are limited by your ability to find a job, and that's critical at that point. Like, you have a limited runway, you have to find a job soon. So at that point, your focus should be pinpoint to whatever you think is going to work. Once you have a job, you can probably start shifting away from that or more into it, depending on if you actually hit the nail the first time. So other than that, like other than these two use cases, I would say the general thing is that learn methodologies, learn design methodologies of how to handle design sprint, how to handle a task, how to plan a task ahead, how to project plan and manage. That's a really neat little skill that can come in handy. And major design tools are a must. So nowadays for engineering, I would say try to become a full stack engineer. That's something that's a lot of companies are sorely lacking nowadays. But even if you're a front end, for example, Angular is a huge thing nowadays at companies. And remember, large companies tend to be behind the curve a few years. So whatever I say right now is a hugely needed thing. That usually means that a large company needs it, which means it's 3 years old minimum. So TypeScript in the future is going to be a huge thing for a lot of companies. And in terms of engineering, of course, we are still trying to pick up Figma at our workplace, but there's a little bit of pushback, and we have a lot of legacy design elements that we just can't convert one-to-one easily. So it's a challenge. Anyways, pick up all the design tools you can get. So in my field, we use Sketch, Figma, and Adobe XD all the time. So InVision is a nice tool extra. If you can, come up and learn the basics of GitHub and how Zeppelin works. That's going to be a huge plus for your portfolio. They are really easy to learn, relatively fast to learn as well, but they add a little bit to your portfolio in terms of value. That, like, I worked with this tool, that means I can work with other.
Great.
Version management, of course. And in terms of design, try to learn what a design system is and how to utilize it properly, how to even create your own small design system. I'm not saying that you might be able to do a huge design system like Source, for example, for Vodafone, because it isn't just a design system, it's a whole methodology behind it. But if you can create the component library of that design system, that's already a huge thing, because that means you are familiar how to utilize previously established work, and you're not starting from scratch just because you don't know how to load up a symbol from a design system, basically. So try to focus on these things. And one major aspect, if in either cases, don't stop learning. Continue to study new skills and tools, because all of these things that you learn throughout your career, they will be tools to use in your toolboxes. And when you reach a certain level and a certain maturity in your career and you become senior, these tools will be basically, they will be the bread and butter of what you will be capable of doing, because you're not going to be limited to do just X, Y, and Z. You will be able to change the methodology behind it, the methods being adapted and used across the industry. And occasionally your value will be just because your value will be defined just on the basis of how well you improved a certain aspect of the whole process. So as long as you keep learning, you will land quite good jobs, because you will keep expanding and always be able to bring in new things to a company. Because, as I said, large companies are usually behind the curve a few years. That's because they are slower moving. But if you're able to bring in value like this, you will be, I would say, valued. Get the pun? Terrible, but you will be valued a little bit better and more, like they will appreciate that. And large companies tend to appreciate good. It's just occasionally, and one other thing, if you're at a larger company, don't be afraid to shift positions when the time comes, when the time is right, even within company or outside of company. I notice a lot of people get jaded over time because of the fact that they have been working for so long at a certain position, and they feel that they should be moving forward, but they aren't. Companies have a little bit of a ladder thing into them, so you can't really climb the corporate ladder at always. So if you think that you need a better job, then seize the opportunity and make that happen.
Yeah, 100% agree.
A lot of times people think that they are stuck in a job because the company doesn't give you the opportunity to grow. No. The opportunity is always there. It's how you take that opportunity and how you perceive it is what's different. Usually companies don't give out promotions ahead of time. They give promotions in recognition of you doing that job already. So if you feel that, maybe try taking a project inside a company that nobody else really wants to touch.
Yeah, I actually talk a lot about that kind of stuff on my channel as well. One of the videos that's pretty hits home for a lot of people is why a steady job is bad for your career, and getting complacent in a career where you're getting passed up for promotion, and at what point does working in a steady job become a detriment if you're interested in progressing? And so if you're interested in that, I recommend you go and check out there's that video that really kind of highlights why that is such a bad thing for your career. So I think you bring up a really good point. But it's all about continuous improvement and taking ownership and being aggressive in your career, and not just letting the work come to you. And I think that's where a lot of people fall into this complacency.
You will not get jobs offered to you out of the blue. Well, eventually you do. Eventually, people will contact you directly to hire you for a certain job or a certain gig, but not when you start out. When you're making yourself a name, you have to actively look for a job. And I think one of the kind of misconceptions about LinkedIn and other tools like this is, if I go onto LinkedIn, then I will get all the jobs in the world. No. It will connect you to people who can get you a job. But if you don't actively seek them out, it's not going to work out for you. Like, I can't recall the last time I actually had a LinkedIn offer work out for me. However, when I sought out the same person, not the same person, but the same position in a different way, it turned out far differently. So if you're going to be complacent and accept that, I don't have to do anything, it's whatever recommendation I get is going to be good enough, no. You have to actively fight for these positions and actively seek out these positions. That's one of the coolest things I can cool is a relative term here, but that's one of the advices I could give everyone is don't wait for the opportunity, because it will never present itself, and you should go for the opportunity, whether it be in-house or an external company. The positions will not come to you. You will have to fight for them. You will have to seek them out, and just feel free to do so. So don't lock yourself into a single company, but don't be afraid to change things in the company to improve your circumstances.
Yeah, 100% agree. So do we have any final thoughts? Anything else that you'd like to add to this conversation regarding the user interface and how to get started?
Yeah, so one of the key and hardest things to get as a starting person, somebody who's fresh into user interface and user experience design, is somebody professional to look at your portfolio and resume. And I would say I wouldn't recommend that you go and hire a resume doctor or anything else, but learn how to make a resume for yourself. That's a crucial part of your job, and it's a crucial part of your communication skills as well. Learn to make a resume, learn to make a portfolio, and improve yourself. And if you need additional help, my LinkedIn is open, so feel free to poke me with your resume and portfolio to just get a few small tidbits.
Yeah, I'll leave a link for your LinkedIn below. And I agree with you 100%. The resume is designed to get your foot in the door. It's designed to get you past me as the recruiter. And ultimately, you have to have a fine balance between getting enough information to get me easy to digest information for me to get you past the first round, because when we're looking at hundreds and potentially thousands of resumes, it's a really quick process. And if you don't have good design principles, you don't have all of there's a fine balance between having the right amount of information but not too much, but also giving enough. Because if I pass a resume on to you as a hiring authority that has enough for me to get there but doesn't have enough for you, you're going to look at it and say, well, I don't see these core things on the resume. So customization of resumes and all of that kind of stuff, it becomes super important. So the resume is absolutely learn how to write a resume. And if you need more help with your resume, I actually offer a resume writing course called Resume Rocket Fuel. It's designed to get you from cradle to grave, basically how to write a resume if you've never even written a resume before, all the way through all the best design principles, how to get you past the ATS system, how to get you how to customize resumes per the job, and the best way to do that, so that you pass the first interview, you get the first interview, pass it, and then I get you on to the second interview. And then I have another course that kind of takes you through how to get all the way to the end. So completely 100% agree. I will leave a link for your LinkedIn in the course in this video description, so that people can, if they want to reach out to you. So I just ask if you do decide to reach out. Gabor's been very generous with his offer, so please be considerate, and keep in mind that he's got a full-time job and this is not his gig. So keep your questions and respectful and short, so that he doesn't get bombarded.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you don't expect an answer by tomorrow morning, 8 a.m.
Yeah, be patient.
Yeah, that's the only request I have, is if you send me your resume and portfolio to quickly review. I'm a surface level quick review is going to take me a little bit of time, but for a deeper review, it might take a little bit more time. So just be considerate of that.
And I'm sure that if they had some more deep, I'm sure you have consulting that you can always set up a session with them to really walk through how to, but you could contact him through there if you wanted to, if you wanted, that's something Gabor, if you were interested in, you could always do. But yeah, just keep your questions simple, and be respectful of his time, because it's very generous. All right, so I think that's a lot of really great information. If you're somebody that's starting into your career path, I guess maybe one last question for you is, do you feel like the user interface, the user experience, user design, interface design is a viable career option? Do you see it as something that's really going to continue to expand? Is it something that somebody who is on the fence about it, would you recommend this as a career?
Short answer, yes, I highly recommend it as a career. It's a good little career to get into, and a lot of challenges to overcome. A little bit longer answer is that there have been attempts to automate most of these functions and features, and there are tools already that automate some parts of our work. But due to the nature of our work, which is human and machine interfacing, there's currently no way in sight in the upcoming 10 years or so where this can be fully automated and customized to the maximum. So I say yes, get into user design, get into the user interface design. Oh my God, it's contagious. So getting into user interface design and user experience design is quite viable, and there's a lot of potential here. However, know that the market is a touch saturated. This means that everybody is trying to get into this field one way or another. So separating yourself out as a good designer is the ticket to getting into any other position, because good designers are few and hard to come by. So as long as you're willing to put in the extra work, you'll probably find a good job really fast.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, I wanted to thank you for your generosity with your time today. I think this is a lot of really excellent advice and insight into this world of how you get started into user interface, how you get started into building a very solid career, and then I think the imposter syndrome thing I'm going to touch on a little bit more in maybe a separate video. But Gabor, I really appreciate your time. Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
Yeah.